When my husband and mother-in-law gave me divorce papers as a gift on my birthday, accompanied by secretly filmed videos, they had no idea a much bigger surprise was waiting for them. They were shocked when I put the perfect offer on top of the divorce papers they had on the table. At 6 a.m., long before the first hint of morning touched the city, Aria Voss woke with a violent cough that scraped through her throat like sandpaper dragged across raw skin. And for a few disoriented seconds, she lay still, eyes half open in the suffocating darkness of the bedroom she shared with Milan, listening to the eerie silence that only broken dreams seemed to create. She reached for her phone. Flinching as the cold blue light stabbed her tired eyes, saw the date Saturday, June 22, and turned her head toward Milan, sprawled across 3/4 of the mattress, breathing heavily, oblivious to the fact that she had just jolted awake from the same nightmare that had been clawing at her chest for weeks. So she carefully slid out from under the blanket without waking him, tiptoed through the corridor, and let herself into the kitchen, where she flipped on the kettle, the dull metallic click sounding far louder in the empty flat than it should have. Then opened the cupboard and gently pulled out the white mug with the black lettering that read, "To the best wife," the one Milan had given her last birthday. A gift that once made her smile but now felt like an inside joke she didn't fully understand anymore. As the water heated, she opened her laptop, the screen glowing alive instantly because she never really shut it down, and the moment she clicked on Job Search 2024, the massive spreadsheet filled the entire display in its brutal, unforgiving honesty. Application, date, company, position, result, and the final column, the one that controlled her heartbeat, was an ocean of red. 70 rejections standing in a neat bloody wall with only 3 yellow cells labeled pending. A pathetic flicker of possibility that somehow hurt more than the rejections themselves, and as she stared at it, Milan appeared silently in the doorway, scratching his stomach through his t-shirt like a bored child. Squinting at her with half-lidded eyes and muttering, "You're awake again?" And she closed the laptop as naturally as she could, hiding the storm in her chest, answering quietly, "Couldn't sleep," then offering, "Want coffee?" Which he accepted with a shrug as he dropped into a chair and yawned dramatically, telling her for the 1,000th time to stop obsessing over that depressing spreadsheet. That maybe she should apply for something simpler like sales in a boutique or reception in a beauty salon because his mother's friend owned a chain of nail studios and could get her in, and Aria swallowed the sting of humiliation as she made him coffee. Thinking of the management course she had been taking for 4 months, how her professor, Dr. Markova, had told her, "You think in systems by instinct," how one of her classmates with 3 degrees had confessed she envied Aria's ability to organize complex information effortlessly. But none of it mattered outside those classroom walls. To Milan, it was all theory, and theory didn't feed the world his world, and after he went to shower she stood alone, staring into her steaming cup, asking herself that terrible question that had grown louder with every passing week. What if I'm just not good enough? She forced herself to work again once Milan left for his Saturday tennis routine, scrolling through job postings on the Russian site, customer service rep at an IT firm, project coordinator at an ad agency, sales specialist at a pharma company. But when she tried drafting a cover letter, every sentence felt either pathetic or arrogant, nothing in between, and just when she was about to rewrite it for the 3rd time, her phone buzzed with a message from Adrian Volkov, the manager at the restaurant where she worked, checking on her after hearing she had been coughing the other day, telling her to rest if needed. And she smiled through sudden tears, because Adrian treated her with more respect than her own husband did. The moment passed quickly when Milan returned much earlier than usual, furious about the tennis court being booked for a kids' tournament despite their reservation, and after ranting, he flung open the fridge, complaining that it was empty again, that they spent too much eating out, that normal couples manage these things. And although she tried to explain she had planned to cook, he brushed her off, dug frozen dumplings from the freezer, and cooked in brooding silence while she tried to refocus on job applications, but found her mind trapped in a loop of his comments about her career, her worth, her failures. Dinner tasted like wet cardboard. And later Milan put on a show about young, successful entrepreneurs, tapping the screen to draw her attention to a glamorous blonde CEO of a coffee chain, saying, "See? She's only 25 and look what she built. This is what ambition looks like. But the caption on screen revealed her father owned an investment fund. And Aria muttered, "Not everyone has family backing," but he dismissed it, telling her success was about desire. And she bit her tongue because her desire was burning enough to set the room on fire, yet reality didn't seem to care. That night, she checked the restaurant group chat where Galina, the head chef, had posted a picture of a huge pot of broth, writing, "A portion saved for you, dear," and Kirill had responded with laughing emojis. And Aria smiled. This was the closest thing she had to community, but when she opened her spreadsheet again, the red cells felt like accusations. She replayed the rejection from 2 weeks before, insufficient relevant experience, even though she had handled VIP clients for years. Solved crises on the spot, memorized preferences of regulars, read emotions like maps, but none of it counted because she didn't have an office beyond the restaurant floor. The weeks ahead weren't looking much better. Rent, medication, her course payment, until suddenly her phone rang with an unfamiliar Moscow number, and instead of ignoring it, she answered, and a clear, warm voice introduced herself as Dara Levin, HR director at the Grand Meridian Hotel in Yaroslavl, saying they had reviewed her application for guest experience manager and were impressed by her background, especially her work under Adrian, whose restaurant was well known for top-tier service. And she asked if Aria had 15 minutes for a preliminary call. For 20 breathless minutes, Aria explained how she handled conflicts, streamlined service, trained new staff, and understood hospitality as emotional intelligence in motion. And Dara listened with genuine interest, telling her at the end, "This is rare. Most people think customers just want efficiency, but you understand atmosphere. We'd like to offer you a 3-month trial for the manager position. Salary $140K during probation, $160K after full benefits, and staff housing 5 minutes from the hotel." And Aria pressed a hand to her chest, dizzy from the sudden shift in her fate, whispering that yes, of course, she accepted. And when she hung up, she buried her face in a pillow to stifle a scream. It finally happened. But before she could even breathe, Milan called out that his mother, Victoria, had arrived. Victoria, who never addressed Aria with warmth, was sitting at the table flipping through legal documents, but tonight she smiled sweetly, too sweetly, asking about Aria's birthday on Thursday because she had arranged a surprise dinner at a beautiful restaurant, insisting Aria was family, and Aria felt a chill under the sugar-coated tone but said nothing. Over the next days, she prepared for her video interview with the general director Leonid Sokolov, who turned out to be kind, perceptive, and unexpectedly enthusiastic about her restaurant background, telling her half their best staff came from dining service because those people knew pressure, timing, and responsibility better than anyone. And when the official offer letter arrived, Aria printed 3 copies and hid one in her handbag like a secret talisman. At the restaurant that night, Galina teased her about being in love because she was glowing again. Kirill winked as he passed. Mira, the new waitress, looked at her with admiration, and Aria realized she was rediscovering the version of herself she thought she'd lost. But the next morning, Milan casually announced that Victoria had booked her birthday dinner at Adrian's restaurant, the very place Aria worked, and wanted everyone dressed nicely because photos would be taken, and Aria's stomach dropped. She imagined sitting there like a guest, being evaluated by the same woman who had spent 2 years reminding her she wasn't good enough for her son. Still, she bought a blue dress that made her look like someone stepping into a new life, had her neighbor style her hair, and just before leaving for the dinner, Dara called to confirm her start date in 2 weeks and wished her a beautiful birthday. And Aria slipped the printed job offer into her purse because something in her gut told her she'd need it. At the restaurant, Adrian personally seated them at the best table, smiling warmly at Aria, and her colleagues beamed proudly from across the room. But Victoria commented that the place had a charming provincial vibe and was suitable for its level, while Selene recorded stories for social media, making snide jokes disguised as compliments. Throughout the evening, Victoria kept probing Aria about her studies, her plans, her future, smiling that unsettling smile that had venom hidden behind pearls, and Aria kept waiting for the punchline she could feel approaching like a storm front. After the main course, she excused herself to the restroom, leaned against the cold wall, breathing deeply as she touched the envelope in her purse, telling herself, "You can do this. You're not the same woman you were 2 months ago." When she returned, the restaurant lights dimmed and Mira emerged with a birthday cake sparkling with 30 candles, followed by Galina holding a tray of champagne, the whole staff singing, and Aria closed her eyes, wishing for courage, just courage before blowing out the candles. Then came the gifts. Celine gave her cheap earrings, Milan handed her a spa certificate, and finally Victoria pulled out a heavy pink envelope, everyone leaning in as Aria opened it, revealing official divorce documents already filled out by a notary. Needing only her signature, time froze. Conversation at nearby tables continued, but at their corner everything went silent. Celine raised her phone to capture the moment. Victoria leaned forward, her voice dripping honey as she asked, "Now do you understand, dear?" And Milan looked away in shame or cowardice. Aria couldn't tell. She read every line, every accusation disguised as mutual agreement, saw her name printed like a verdict, and then, with absolute clarity, she picked up the pen and signed. The click of the pen echoed like a gunshot. She put the papers back into the envelope, set them on the table, and then quietly pulled out the offer letter from Grand Meridian, placing it next to them so the contrast between destruction and rebirth was impossible to ignore. Telling them calmly that she had been hired as guest experience manager with a salary higher than Milan's, a private apartment and benefits, and that her restaurant experience, yes, the same one they mocked, was considered elite in the hospitality industry. Adrian applauded from across the room. Galina wiped her eyes, Kirill whistled, and even the regular customers toasted to her, shouting, "To our star," while Victoria hissed that it was all manipulation, accusing Aria of planning this spectacle. But Aria stood, smoothing her dress, saying she had planned nothing. They had attempted to humiliate her publicly, to make her break down on camera, to immortalize her collapse. But they had written the script without considering that she might choose a different ending. She thanked them for the best gift they could have offered, her freedom, and turned to leave as Milan choked out her name, begging to talk. But she didn't stop. She strode through the restaurant, hugged Galina, shook Kirill's hand, nodded to Adrian, and stepped into the humid night air, letting her phone buzz until it finally went silent. Over the next 2 weeks, she packed slowly, keeping only what belonged to her, leaving behind the life she had squeezed herself into for 2 years. Milan came once to plead, saying his mother regretted the misunderstanding, but Aria only laughed, asking if that was what they called pre-signed divorce paperwork now, and he left without another word. At her farewell dinner, the entire staff celebrated her. Galina made enough food for an army. Adrian told her she was one of the finest specialists he had ever worked with. Kirill joked she should hire him someday, and Mira walked her to the train with tears in her eyes, saying she wished she could start over too, but her sick mother kept her here. And Aria told her softly that every journey begins the moment you stop doubting your worth. On the train to Yaroslavl, Aria turned off her phone, leaned against the window, and let the fields pass by in blurs of green and gold, feeling something she hadn't felt in years, quiet, unshakable certainty. She wasn't running away. She was finally walking toward herself, toward the woman she was always meant to be, toward a life where she wouldn't be measured by someone else's standards, where her voice wouldn't be dismissed as theory, where her presence wasn't an inconvenience but an asset. And as the train carried her forward, she repeated her new name silently. Aria Voss, guest experience manager, Grand Meridian Hotel, not Milan's wife. Not a disappointment. Not a servant in her own home, but a woman reborn in the fire meant to destroy her, stepping into a future that finally answered back when she asked, "What if I am enough?"